Good morning. Very nice to have you again for our second day of the Africa Sovereign Investors. Madam Minister, good morning. Welcome, Excellencies, distinguished guests. Thank you very much for being back. Yesterday, you talked a lot about many things. One of them is the resilience of our continent, but also inclusive development in Africa and how to attract investors into Africa, but also how to work together in our continent. But also what the royal message of His Majesty addressed as the expression of Africa's desire to work for its own development. Today we will continue our discussions. The importance of joining efforts actually to rebuild a new model for Africa, but also for adapt to a paradigm shift in our continent. The role of sovereign funds can play also in those paradigm shifts. So without waiting and without waiting more, my first guest and our first keynote speaker that I'm going to invite to the stage right now is Professor Javier Capapi, the Director of the Sovereign Wealth Research at the Center for the Governance of Change at the IE University in Madrid.
Good morning, everyone. I think there is a presentation coming now. First, Obaid, thank you for inviting me. We met just, I think, 3 weeks ago in Madrid during an event, and he proposed me, okay, why don't you come and tell us a little bit about your research. I'm Javier Capapi. I belong to IE University. There, we created a Center for Research on Sovereign Wealth Funds. I've been researching sovereign wealth funds for 14 years now. So in the room, I would say that out of the 21 sovereign wealth funds we consider active today in Africa, 13 of them were non-existent when I started researching. So, I mean, the majority of them are quite new, and I think that brings a lot of opportunities. Conversations with, for example, Egypt, they told me, you know, we have integrated ESG from the very beginning. So this novelty has also good advantages, because in terms of mandate, you can really incorporate many of the things that are affecting today's sovereign wealth fund research. So without further ado, IE University is in Madrid. We have undergraduate studies, and most of you know it, and we are happy to host you. We have 2 campuses, one in the 13th. We are in a building, in a 13th century building, and we have just built a skyscraper, 180 meters, that is a vertical campus for our undergrads. So happy to combine history and tradition with the innovation and future. Okay, so I will bring you just a very brief talk on stylized facts about sovereigns, some trends on their investment activity, and I will try to incorporate a few things with an African's perspective. So if you think at this first slide, assets under management of sovereign wealth funds have been growing exponentially over the last years. You see 43, 44% change over the last 6 years, 10% over the last period we analyzed. And the majority of this growth comes from the top 10. So one of the things that we can learn on sovereign wealth funds is that they are super concentrated at the top, right? I know some of these figures may differ from your official figures at home, some because, I mean, you are not allowed to bring that official numbers to the public, and I think this is not a problem. So I think this is not the type of transparency issues that are relevant. I think the transparency issues that are relevant are those that relate with your relationship with the ones that is accountable for you, you are accountable for. So if you think at these numbers, 75% of the total assets under management belong to these top 10, right? And if you get into the top 20, where you have no African sovereign wealth funds so far, they represent 96% of the assets, right? So it's an industry that is very concentrated at the top in terms of size. Then, of course, geographic and institutional settings and institutional backgrounds are very, very different, right? We can say that we have 4 different poles of assets under management in sovereign wealth, right? So you have one pole in the GCC countries. They represent 36% of the total assets, 36. Then you have 1/4 of the total sovereign wealth in China. China itself represents 24%. Then you have around 12% in Norway, just in Norway, and the rest belongs to the southeast part of Asia. So these 4 groups represent more than 80% of the total assets. Again, it's a big concentration geographically. If you think in Africa, we consider that they are around 83, 84 billion in assets under management. Compared to these 10 trillion, they are less than 1% in terms of assets under management. So you need to think you are in a group that is new, that is growing, but that can use or leverage a lot on what was said yesterday, the Friends of Africa, right? I think there is a lot of potential collaboration between these very big financial institutions that have been created elsewhere that can bring a lot of their knowledge, even their talent, and of course sharing a lot of their best practices on how to grow these institutions to these levels. When it comes to activity, again, this is very concentrated, right? So you have Temasek and GIC have been leading in terms of transactions over the last 10 years. So this was the same, almost the same ranking at the top. Then you have, for instance, Mubadala, right? Mubadala have been adding venture capital teams. That's the reason you have a lot of activity, right? Because they invest in smaller transactions. Typically, they co-invest with other multiple investors in rounds where the due diligence can be done faster than in a big infrastructure project. So you have that. Then Qatar is also engaging a lot more into venture over the last period. And then you have other series of funds, right? Again, official figures you may control probably differ from these ones, but this is the ones that we can, as researchers, access publicly. What is interesting that is in the period, the activity has multiplied by 3, right? So more than 450 transactions, direct transactions. Maybe it's a caveat. You can do a lot of things through external managers, but what we can see is what you do directly in the markets, right? Whether it's equity or in-depth transactions, but wherever you invest anything through a fund, that's something we cannot track as researchers. But this is just to say that this is a small peak of the iceberg. A lot of activity is happening behind the scenes in the form of commitments you make into infrastructure funds, venture capital funds, and so on. So when it comes to the transactions multiplied by 3, 120 billion in total value of the investments you participated, which multiplies by 3 the total value in the last period. This is a period that comprises September 2020 to December 2021. 32 mega deals, and I think that's interesting because typically we tend to think about sovereign wealth funds participating in mega deals, right? Deals valued at more than 1 billion. This is multiplied by 4, right? Which entails an important, one of the reasons here is technology, because you have been investing a lot in technology over the years. Well, now technology has come to a situation, well, we will see in the near future, but the venture capital industry where late rounds are massive and they look very much like private equity rounds of the past. But the average deal size increased because of these mega deals, but I want to focus here. So at least 20% of the deals made directly by sovereign wealth funds are below 100 million. And this is another important, let's say, I think it's important to emphasize. We tend to think always, okay, sovereign wealth funds only in billion transactions. That's not true. There are a lot of activity below the 100 hurdle. And I want to focus now on the geography. This is the top 5 destination. Again, this is a permanent picture. United States is leading over the whole series in terms of deal count. But for the first time, if you add up India, China, and Singapore, they represent now more investments than the US. And this is the first time this happened in our series. More than 10 years, for the first time, India, China, and Singapore added together, they represent more deals than in the United States. And I think this is very interesting because if you analyze deals in India, for instance, out of the 5 more important deals by size in India, 4 are tech-based, right? So you're thinking in e-commerce, you're thinking in payment services, you're thinking in e-learning, right? So some of the largest transactions are taking place in the tech sphere of India. So it's not just we are investing in infrastructure. As it was said yesterday by the minister, I think, in industry, on investing in brains, right? So those that can generate jobs. I mean, the e-learning platform is putting together a lot of professors, and it's used by more than 6 million users per month, right? So it's a heavy, let's say, workforce demanding, or let's say workforce labor intense industry. And I think sovereign wealth funds are getting ready into a lot of these businesses these days, and I'm happy that this can be a good way to connect with those investors now in India, one day in Nigeria, in Morocco, or in Ghana. And on the second aspect I can highlight here is China. They have had some regulatory issues related with technology, as you probably know. They are trying to shift from, let's say, consumption-directed technologies into more deep technologies, such as semiconductors and AI. And then you have Singapore. Of course, Singapore, it has also their influence of their own sovereign wealth funds. Let me highlight here industries and sectors. Again, as I said, technology is a bit of a black box, so there are many things, and someone said yesterday technology is difficult to, let's say, to divide, because technology is embedded into almost every business activity today. And we are even considering eliminating this as a sector, because it really, let's say, covers almost everything. Then life sciences, which grew interestingly before the pandemic a lot. So I think that's interesting. And here we are thinking in biotech companies, of course, but also healthcare systems, healthcare, hospitality, real estate, and many others. And then, well, services and industry. You have a better breakdown of the technology, how we divide the sectors into industries, and there you have a lot of these, let's say, described here. Well, I found interesting, you have, we have seen a lot of fintech. Out of the 3 largest fintech deals in the last period we covered, 2 were crypto related, whether it was a crypto platform or a blockchain technology able to, or let's say, apply directly into crypto solutions. This is some of the things that we do. Basically, we put a lot of effort in our annual reports that you can access, by the way, for free. You can download them in the website. We put a lot of effort into them in the reports. And here we highlight the co-investment patterns of sovereign wealth funds in the venture capital space. But you can apply this to infra, you can apply this to real estate, you can apply this even to industry. So we have been able to track the most, let's say, frequent partners of sovereign wealth funds in the venture capital space. And you see very well-known numbers from, I don't know if you can see it well, because it looks like a little bit distorted, but Sequoia is there, Tiger, then you have big asset managers, you have new enterprise associates, big names in the venture capital. What I'm saying here is that over the last years, sovereign wealth funds have gained recognition and reputation to be playing with almost every private partner in the world, right? And as I think it was Uche saying yesterday about the speed of execution, the ability to process and to analyze deals quickly, I think that is one of the things you as a community of African sovereign wealth funds can learn from Nigeria itself, from other countries that have been doing this more professionally over the time, and to upgrade that abilities that you have, to upgrade these capabilities even more, right? Of course, you have other GCC countries doing this for a long period of time and participating with a lot of partners. I think this participation with the external or foreign private partners will also foster you into the directions, including governance, including information systems, including even communications and strategy, right? So I think this partnering is great, and has also created this kind of reputation among the sovereign wealth fund community. There is a warning here, is that some countries are starting to think in sovereign wealth funds because of the reputation of the concept. I think you don't need to, or let's say you shouldn't focus on that reputation, but to build it on your own way, right? Because like to think too much in, I want to focus on this model or that model, can be risky if you don't take into account a lot of the context that you have at home. So I wanted just to highlight that partnership. This is related with climate from our friends of International Forum Sovereign Wealth Funds and the OPSWF. So this is a questionnaire, a survey that they run. What is interesting here is that only 9% of the fund says that combating the effects of climate is in their mandate. If you look at the other big blue, it's the 65, so you have 74 sovereign wealth funds acting despite not having that into their mandate. So I'm saying this because sometimes when you research and you don't meet with you, you are losing big part of the information. One thing is that you have in the mandate, the other thing is that you don't have it in the mandate for various reasons. Maybe the mandate was written years ago, but you are actually let's say, acting and operating under a different vision, right? So I think that's also interesting in this particular setting of climate. Well, there are other surveys that you can go into the reports also of the forum. They run this one on whether you consider climate research, climate change approach. Of course, here you will see paradoxes. Let me go back. There are a lot of paradoxes in the transition. Now, energy security is becoming more important than climate issues in the short run in Europe, if you think about it. Also, there is an important element of greenwashing that is going to be tackled from the regulatory point of view very heavily. If you think in DWS, probably you are familiar, the largest fund manager in continental Europe, owned by Deutsche Bank. The CEO resigned simply because they said they were selling an amount of funds that were sustainability and green related, and that was not true. Or let's say there is suspicion that it's not true and they are under investigation. The police raided the DWS headquarters because of that. So we will see a new wave of, let's say, combating greenwashing from Europe, at least, and the SEC is now renewing the regulation around naming, right? You cannot name anymore a fund as an ESG if you don't have at least, I think it's, maybe I'm not right here, 70% of your assets are related to that particular policy. So we will see a lot of, let's say, going forward, going back a little bit in this transition, which is typically normal. I'm just putting this slide just to showcase how sovereign wealth funds are typically behind many of the real assets that we either use or that we use even not knowing it, right? These are the largest logistics players in Europe. So you have names like Prologis, Logicor, CBRE, the real estate global company. But if you look at who owns, at least partially in the case of Prologis, these companies, you have this picture. So Norges Bank has a very, very important co-investment program with Prologis in Europe, a 50-50 joint venture. So the majority, I would say at least 50% of a lot of these 17 million of assets, million square meters that are used in Europe for moving goods and for helping into the consumption transformation, or let's say the consumer behavior transformation from physical to digital, right, are owned by a sovereign wealth fund. They really like this idea of, investing in an asset that is inflation protected, that is giving stable long-run returns. China Investment Corporation made the largest acquisition in the UK in 2017, if I'm right, on Logicor. More than $13 billion invested in the largest player at that time in Europe. And then you have logistics, which is fully owned by GIC, P3 Parks, the Singaporeans. So a lot of the assets that we see are owned by sovereign funds even without us noticing it, right? Because normally they are B2B, they like B2B companies, and they are discreet. And I think that's fine. You don't need to be, let's say, publicly saying all the time what you do to the general public, but of course you need to report very, very cautiously to your government, to your parliament, if that's necessary, to the Ministry of Finance, to have a very, very strong accountability setting. I think it's super key, and we have learned that from episodes that have happened in Africa and other parts of the world that are not the ones that we want to see in the sovereign wealth fund industry. Just to close, I have this slide on just some investments we analyze on food and agriculture over the years. Here you have a very nice infographic on how they have been expanding dramatically the number of investments and the volume invested into these key sectors. So again, you can use, or you should use strategically sovereign wealth funds to protect national security, and that includes, of course, food, and being strategic, right? You can have a very good agreement with a great operator in Europe or in the US or in Latin America that can bring home their expertise and knowledge, right? We have seen, if you remember, things like done from, from Mubadala, who were able to attract General Electric through a big agreement. Today, they are serving parts of the airplanes to Airbus, right? So they have been able to create an industry from the scratch, right? So this is of course, in the report, we also include the SOEs that were established and launched through the sovereign wealth funds over the last period, particularly in countries that are really in need of this kind of asset because they lack of arable land. well, as you can see, the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund, you can invest in the whole value chains from the agricultural inputs to the food ingredient companies. You have a lot of investments in innovation that will help you to thrive over this very, let's say, complicated period where water scarcity, land scarcity, climate change, or global warming, let's say. So you have a lot of options where you can be even recreating meat without using cows. You can be producing even milk without a cow. So there are a lot of solutions that can be, and that have been invested by sovereign wealth funds in the last period, so to use innovation to combat the effects of multiple of the consequences of climate. And I think I'm gonna stop around here just to tell you how long-term investors you are. You can be thinking in solutions for the long run. So over the period we analyzed here, we were intrigued by the fact that, well, there have been a tremendous increase in the value of the investments in renewable energy over the last 3 years, from 1.1 billion to more than 5.7 billion in value of the investments in 2021. But this may include things like 2.5 billion invested in nuclear energy, right? So you have sovereign wealth funds investing in things that are not commercially viable today, but they have the promise to be commercially viable in the next, now it's around 7, even 10 years, investing with MIT spin-off projects, California projects, Canadian projects. They are doing a lot on nuclear. So you have sovereign wealth funds participating in these long-term energy solutions of the future. So I really maybe close here with a bit of a reflection. Okay, keep the focus on the long run. Be very clear on how do you regulate the way the money comes in and comes out of the fund. Be very strategic with the selection of your talent. I think we have heard that many times, but the ability to hire best talent is going to be important. Train that talent because technologies and changes globally are affecting us, everyone, very, very quickly in ways that we didn't expect only 3 years ago. And being able to share. So events like these are very important. And Obaid was saying the first day, this is very important, but this is the first step. I mean, we really need to move into action. You need to transform these talks into action. But I think these talks are necessary to ignite the action, right? To say, okay, we have an opportunity here. We can join forces here. We can create something together. You can even think bolder and try to build something that can be done together, really together among all the funds in the same way. Build something that is just beyond investments, right? And that's something you are doing, which is building this trust that will help you to have accelerate many of the investments that you can deploy in the coming years. So let me just close here. Thank you very much. As I said, you can access all these reports and information. I'm available if you want, whenever you want, and happy to be here, and thank you for your attention. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Professor, if I may, I just have one question. It's not in the program, but I would like to ask you, because I saw in the 5 destinations that Africa is not there.
Yes.
The World Bank did a research study in 2016 and find out at that time that Africa actually gets the lowest share of funds coming from the sovereign wealth funds. Is it still the same thing today? And do we understand why?
Well, I think it was said here. I mean, you know it better. Scale is a problem. If you look at these numbers, if you have 1 billion to invest, you need to find at least solutions. I mean, you can reduce that size a little bit into hundreds, but if you want to invest 100 equity, the project should be much bigger than that, and that's not easy. So that's why I really believe these kind of projects are very important, because you can add up projects, you can create umbrella solutions that pooling investments can be attractive for big projects. And also this perception of risk is important, right? There's still this perception of risk that is so prevalent around the globe, not only in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, where you may have, associations like this. So when, as it was said in many of the sessions yesterday about best cases. You need to highlight those best cases. And you have great examples. Maybe I'm going back to Uche again because of the friendship. We met last time 6 years ago in New Zealand, Auckland. But, I mean, being able to build a very robust institutional setting or governance setting in Nigeria is not easy. And that's a great example for the world, not only for Africa.
Yeah.
So you should highlight those examples that started in Africa in order to generate this, to increase that attraction. Yeah,
also.
to be more attractive. So perception, scale, and then, of course, data. I mean, the more you are able to measure what you do, the better for investors, right? I mean, if they can see track record, if they can see continuous track record, then, I mean, they will be attracted because they are looking for returns. That's for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Please now to welcome to the stage the Honorable Moussa Mara, Chartered Accountant, but also former Prime Minister of Mali. Please join me. Je vous en prie, ça va, merci. Alors, je voulais commencer tout d'abord par une chose dont on a beaucoup parlé effectivement. Aujourd'hui, les pays africains veulent faire mieux. En attendant, on fait tous face à énormément de défis, de challenges. Je voudrais commencer tout d'abord par vous demander votre avis sur l'importance justement d'une initiative comme ASIF pour répondre et faire face à ces challenges.
Merci bien. Je vais d'abord commencer par évidemment remercier le directeur Obeid et Itmar Capital pour d'abord m'avoir invité et ensuite pour avoir lancé une initiative de ce type et joindre ces remerciements à tout ce qui a été dit hier. Je voudrais commencer par un mot qui n'est pas apparu dans les discours hier. Et ce mot pour moi est historique. Parce que ce qui est en train d'être fait et ce qui a commencé à être fait hier, c'est quelque chose qui est historique. Parce que pour la première fois à ma connaissance sur le continent, on essaye de mettre ensemble des capacités de financement à la confluence entre le public et les méthodes de management privées, que sont les fonds souverains pour soutenir les infrastructures, pour soutenir le développement du continent. Donc c'est vraiment historique. Et c'est à mettre au même niveau que des initiatives comme le NEPAD ou même encore plus loin que l'initiative de Lagos au début des années 80. Donc à ce titre-là, très sincèrement, le Itmar Capital, le directeur Obeid, le gouvernement marocain, parce que le gouvernement marocain aussi sans doute a joué un rôle sous le leadership éclairé de Sa Majesté, que Dieu l'assiste. Je pense que nous devrons vraiment féliciter cette initiative. Ensuite, pour revenir un peu plus à votre question, je pense que mettre ensemble des capacités pour essayer à notre niveau, on a bien compris sur la base des chiffres qui viennent de nous être montrés que ce qui est fait ailleurs, c'est à d'autres niveaux que ce que nous sommes en train d'essayer de faire ici, mais il faut bien commencer par quelque chose. C'est quelque chose qui est absolument souhaitable aujourd'hui. Partager des expériences, on l'a dit hier, mettre en commun des capacités, on l'a dit, essayer aussi d'intéresser les montants faramineux qui existent par ailleurs pour les amener sur le continent africain, tout cela est à mettre au crédit de l'initiative et pour ça, je pense que l'initiative mérite d'être encouragée. Moi, je suggérerais simplement peut-être deux choses. La première chose, c'est d'essayer d'aller vers quelque chose de concret. La meilleure chose qu'on puisse faire, c'est de réaliser quelque chose à la suite de cette initiative. Et la deuxième suggestion, c'est d'essayer de nous rapprocher davantage des institutionnels. Il y a les institutionnels en termes de financement, la BAD et d'autres institutionnels, mais il y a aussi les institutionnels politiques, l'Union africaine et notamment les communautés économiques et régionales. Parce que si l'économie et les finances sont la clé, elle est tenue par les politiques. Donc il faut aussi que cette connexion puisse se faire.
Alors justement, on veut faire mieux, on parle beaucoup de mobilité, on parle beaucoup de coopération. On a parlé hier par exemple de la mobilité aussi bien des investissements que des investisseurs, mais il y a aussi la mobilité des idées, les échanges d'expériences, puisque vous parlez de quelque chose de concret. Est-ce que ça, c'est pas aussi une autre manière de travailler ensemble, en s'inspirant les uns des autres et en échangeant sur les expériences et les choses qui ont marché en fait?
Absolument. Et là, je reviens de manière un peu plus concrète à notre niveau. Quand je regarde ce qui se fait au niveau des pays francophones, par exemple, nous avons énormément d'exemples, énormément de choses à apprendre de ce qui se fait dans les pays anglophones, notamment sur le continent africain. Vous l'avez vu hier, la plupart des fonds de souveraineté importants viennent de pays anglophones plutôt en Afrique. Il y a une pratique, il y a une expérience, il y a peut-être même des exemples d'actions concrètes qui ont été faites qui pourraient être dupliquées au niveau des pays francophones. Et là, l'initiative de l'ACI serait quand même quelque chose de tout à fait positif, afin que ces idées de mettre en commun des financements disponibles, mettre en commun des épargnes qui peuvent aussi être mobilisées, comme on l'a entendu hier, mettre en commun des actifs. On a des pays miniers, on a des pays qui ont des ressources importantes avec des actifs publics. Tout cela, ce sont des exemples qui peuvent être partagés. Et c'est à cela aussi, je pense que l'ACIF mérite d'être encouragé. L'autre élément, c'est des initiatives de connectivité des pays. Nous avons tous compris qu'en matière d'infrastructure, les pays sont en train individuellement de faire des efforts. Mais pour que des projets comme la zone de libre-échange continentale puissent avoir des réalisations concrètes, il faut que des infrastructures de connectivité, des infrastructures en matière de production et d'accès à l'énergie soient de plus en plus partagées entre les pays pour renforcer l'intégration. Et là, je pense que l'initiative ACIF, là aussi, peut avoir un impact tout à fait concret et mérite d'être encouragée et soutenue.
Alors, le continent africain, on l'a compris, hein, veut se doter de mécanismes de financement importants, veut attirer justement ces fonds dont vous parliez. Qu'est-ce que les pays africains peuvent faire pour devenir une destination plus intéressante pour ces fonds? Qu'est-ce qu'on peut améliorer? Je sais par exemple qu'il y a la question de la gouvernance. Ça, c'est quelque chose qui vous est cher. Parlez-nous justement de si on peut faire une autocritique sur des choses qu'on peut construire, qu'on peut améliorer aujourd'hui, même s'il y a... Aujourd'hui, on parle beaucoup d'une amélioration tendancielle, justement, entre autres de la gouvernance.
C'est vrai qu'on note depuis une vingtaine d'années que les pays se convertissent progressivement à la notion de la bonne gouvernance. Le classement Doing Business est une réalité maintenant dans beaucoup de pays. Des efforts sont faits en matière de réforme, mais nous devons poursuivre dans cette direction. Nous devons poursuivre dans cette direction pour que la perception, et mon prédécesseur tout à l'heure l'a dit tout à l'heure, hein, c'est la perception qu'il faut qu'on travaille à changer. Au niveau international, les pays africains ont encore l'image de pays où il est difficile de travailler, où il est difficile d'investir, où la justice ne fonctionne pas très bien, où la politique aussi a des faiblesses, où la stabilité n'est pas une réalité. Donc nous devons fournir des efforts en la matière. Mais en matière de fonds d'investissement, pour revenir au sujet, il y a aussi des efforts à faire. Hier, il y a eu quelques interventions qui ont insisté dessus. Quand les pays se dotent de fonds de ce niveau, il faut faire des efforts en matière d'abord de compétences et de capacités de ceux qui vont avoir la charge de gérer ces fonds. Nous devons éviter de recruter des personnes qui n'ont pas les capacités et des personnes qui n'ont pas les visions. Et à ce titre, la diaspora africaine doit aussi être, je pense, conviée, parce que dans la diaspora africaine, nous avons de grandes capacités, nous avons des personnes qui sont impliquées à différents niveaux, avec des responsabilités importantes qui peuvent être utiles dans la gestion de ces fonds d'investissement. Il faut faire des efforts là-dessus. Après, il faut aussi assurer l'autonomie. Et c'est peut-être ce qui est un peu difficile par rapport à des structures qui sont quand même des structures publiques en tant que propriété. Mais il faut absolument faire des efforts pour que ces fonds soient gérés avec les standards du secteur privé de manière tout à fait efficace. Donc il y a la gouvernance au niveau des pays, il y a la gouvernance au niveau des fonds d'investissement, et après il y a la gouvernance au niveau de l'association des fonds d'investissement. Et une des initiatives aussi que je suggérerais à l'ACIF, c'est essayer de travailler à des nouvelles narratives sur le continent pour faire en sorte que le regard sur le continent en termes de risques et en termes de perception puisse aussi évoluer. Et là, je suis sûr que l'ACIF pourra contribuer, et derrière l'ACIF, les fonds qui en sont membres.
Vous avez parlé de la diaspora, c'est un point qui est très important puisqu'on parle souvent de la fuite des cerveaux de l'Afrique vers l'Ouest, vers l'Europe, vers l'Amérique. Mais qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire justement pour renouer le lien avec cette diaspora pour le bien, entre autres économiquement, du continent? Puisqu'il y a un lien humainement, il y a un lien à travers la société civile souvent. Cette diaspora est attachée à ses origines. Mais est-ce qu'on ne peut pas avoir une perspective plus business justement et profiter de ces compétences qui sont à l'étranger?
Je pense qu'il faut que le leadership continental, ceux qui ont la charge de la direction de nos pays, soient conscients que la diaspora est une opportunité. Et cette opportunité va au-delà de l'envoi au pays des financements. Aujourd'hui, principalement, c'est la considération que nous avons de la diaspora. On envoie des milliards de dollars au pays, mais on préfère que la diaspora reste là où elle est. À mon avis, il faut changer de perception. J'ai dit tout à l'heure que tous nos pays, c'est le cas du Maroc, c'est le cas du Mali, c'est le cas d'autres pays, ont dans leur diaspora suffisamment de capacités, de compétences pour impacter significativement la marche du pays. Donc nous devons comprendre cela et voir à la diaspora une opportunité en termes de gestion, en termes même de réforme, voire même de révolution de nos pays, plutôt que simplement de l'envoi de fonds au pays. Cela nécessite que nous fassions des efforts. Que nous fassions des efforts d'abord en termes d'identification, en termes de suivi. Nous, ici, si je donne un exemple, nous avons des milliers d'étudiants maliens qui sont au Maroc. Mais il n'y a pas suffisamment de contact entre ceux-ci et le pays. Alors que normalement, l'État devrait s'organiser pour les suivre dans leur évolution en termes d'études et identifier des voies et moyens pour faciliter le retour et l'insertion dans le pays. Ça, c'est des efforts que tous les pays africains doivent faire parce que tous les pays africains ont des diasporas formidables et sur tous les continents. Et je pense que ça peut contribuer, je dirais, à renforcer les liens entre l'Afrique et le reste du monde, à donner de nouvelles perspectives à l'élite africaine par rapport à la marche du monde et donc à accroître les chances d'un développement socio-économique plus endogène et plus maîtrisé.
Et cette diaspora, d'ailleurs, qui vit à l'étranger, peut aussi participer à ce changement de perception de l'Afrique, puisqu'ils connaissent bien aussi ce regard de l'extérieur. J'aimerais qu'on termine sur la jeunesse africaine. Vous avez parlé des jeunes Maliens. La jeunesse africaine, aujourd'hui, quand on parle de l'Afrique, on parle souvent de cette démographie galopante, mais on en parle presque comme un handicap et pas comme un atout qui peut aider le continent. Vous disiez à un moment, si la politique ne s'occupe pas des jeunes, les jeunes s'occuperont de la politique. Oui. Comment est-ce qu'on peut mieux s'occuper des jeunes, justement, toujours dans cette tendance pour améliorer les choses en Afrique?
C'est vrai que la jeunesse, et je crois que c'est le Premier ministre Zenzou qui en a parlé hier par rapport à la démographie et par rapport aux efforts importants à faire pour faire diminuer le taux de chômage, tant l'effectif des jeunes en demande d'emploi est important. La jeunesse apparaît d'abord comme un défi, comme une menace, comme une charge, comme un challenge à gérer. Mais c'est aussi une opportunité en termes de créativité, en termes d'agilité d'esprit, en termes de connexion au monde, en termes de maîtrise des technologies et tous ces domaines, nous en avons suffisamment parlé hier. Mais pour que cette menace cesse de l'être et devienne une opportunité, on a quand même des efforts importants à faire. Et là, on revient à la politique. J'avais un peu ouvert la brèche par rapport à la question politique, je termine par ça. La politique reste quand même la clé. Le politique, le leader politique, la vision, la capacité d'orienter la collectivité dans une direction déterminée reste quand même toujours la clé. Et là, nous avons là aussi des efforts importants à faire sur le continent. C'est en train d'évoluer, mais il faudrait qu'on aille un peu plus vite. Et pour, je dirais, terminer par un message par rapport à la salle, ici, nous avons des investisseurs, nous avons des businessmen, nous avons des gens qui sont plutôt, on va dire, connectés à faire. Je me rappelle hier, dans mes discussions avec Salomon, le vice-président de la BAD, à un moment, il m'a dit, moi, je suis dans le business, je suis dans le développement, je ne suis pas politique. Et ça a attiré mon attention. Souvent, la politique est perçue comme quelque chose qui n'est pas bien, quelque chose dont il faut... Mais je reste toujours persuadé que c'est la politique qui détient la clé. Le business est important, l'économie est importante, mais tout ça, c'est la politique. Donc, il faut que quelque part, on multiplie les liens aussi entre ce monde et le monde politique Et peut-être que certains de ces leaders économiques doivent aussi un tout petit peu arpenter le chemin politique pour contribuer à faire évoluer davantage le chemin politique, à le rendre pro-business, mieux pro-business, plus ouvert aux innovations et aux changements, plus ouvert au management du secteur privé dans le secteur public. Et là, l'initiative de l'ACIF et puis de la mise en commun des fonds de souveraineté est une initiative qui est précurseur en la matière et qu'il faudrait encourager et qui devrait travailler sur tous ces domaines-là. Mais moi, je suis optimiste. Je pense qu'on ouvre une porte ici. Je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, c'est l'histoire aussi qui nous parle. Et peut-être demain et après-demain, nous rendrons grâce à Obeid et à son équipe pour avoir ouvert cette nouvelle opportunité pour le continent. Je suis vraiment optimiste par rapport à ça.
Il nous reste juste un tout petit peu de temps, mais comme on parle d'inclusion et que vous avez parlé de la jeunesse, je voudrais juste terminer un petit mot sur les femmes. La femme africaine est aussi un peu à la base de beaucoup de choses, et on l'a vu dans le domaine économique, quand elle participe, quand elle arrive à participer, elle fait des merveilles. C'est peut-être aussi une chose sur laquelle il faut investir, l'intégration et l'inclusion des femmes.
Oui, je suis tout à fait d'accord avec vous. Et là aussi, je vais faire le lien avec hier et avec la discussion avec Salomon. Il me disait lors de la signature de l'accord hier, il y a quelque chose, il n'y a pas de femmes dans le groupe des représentants des fonds de souveraineté ici. Donc vous aussi, vous êtes interpellés. Nous devons tous faire des efforts par rapport aux femmes.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci bien.
Monsieur
Merci.
Boussama. Merci infiniment. Merci. Thank you so much. Well, we will continue now. We talked a lot about infrastructure, and it appears clearly as something very important for Africa, especially to attract private capitals. The role of infrastructure in reshaping the development model in Africa is very important, and developing infrastructure would also help maybe the continent to take advantage of its own resources. But for that, we need money, of course, like for everything that we've been talking about. We need money, and to get the money, you have to develop, and we've said that yesterday, bankable projects. And for that, we need institutions that can help to build and shape those innovative projects that will attract the funds. This is why a structure like Africa 50 comes in, which is an investment platform that operates under the aegis of the African Union to attract private investments, especially in infrastructure. So without further ado, I invite the CEO of Africa 50, Mr. Alain Ebobisse, to join.
Thank you. Good morning, and Excellencies, colleagues, friends. First of all, let me start by thanking Obeid and Itmar for inviting Africa 50 to participate in this important event. I am very happy to be here. Of course, as we celebrate the launch of a new initiative that will, without any doubt, make a significant contribution to Africa's growth. The Africa Sovereign Investors Forum, ASIF, embodies a clear commitment from African investors to join forces and shape the continent's future. And I believe that this comes at a very critical time, as the continent is facing unprecedented health, climate crisis, economic shock. I think it requires that government, developing financial institutions, the private sector, sovereign investors should work together in a way that we have never seen before. And in order to do so, we need bold initiatives, and bold initiatives which are driven by African entities, of course, also leveraging global partnerships. It's important. But African entities have to be the driving forces. And I believe that the ASIF initiative is one such bold initiative that will help reach this objective. And really, it's fantastic what is being done here today, I believe. We, at Africa 50, our mandate is to support transformational infrastructure projects. And this is also some of the objective for ASIF. And we believe that ASIF therefore offers an excellent platform for us at Africa 50 to cooperate with institutional investors, ASIF members, and others to develop, help, support the continent's infrastructure. And this is the reason why Africa 50 joined the African Development Bank and ASIF yesterday through the signing of a tripartite letter of intent to strengthen the collaboration of our three entities, including, and this is important, as part of the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, because what we also want to do is to develop and finance greener infrastructure in Africa in order to help accelerate Africa's just and equitable transition to net zero. We are pleased to welcome ASIF as part of the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, led by the African Development Bank. Africa 50 is actively supporting. Us at Africa 50, as a Pan-African investment platform, our goal is to leverage our capital, which is limited, but still, also our expertise, but our 28 African countries who are shareholders, the African Development Bank also, and 2 African central banks, to leverage these stakeholders to invest in bankable projects across the continent. You know, the African Development Bank, which is our funding partner, estimates that about 30 million people in Africa were pushed out and into extreme poverty in 2021 as a result of the COVID-19. In addition, the economic disruption stemming from the Ukraine war would, again, have a negative impact on our continent. But we should have hope, because pre-COVID, Africa, for example, had 6 out of 10 of the fastest growing economies in the world. And in 2021, we also saw a rebound. GDP growth reached 6.9% across the continent, and realizing that the continent actually could recover reasonably well. I do believe that this is our chance to turn this crisis into opportunity and help Africa moving again forward in a faster and more resilient way. And for that, the catalytic role of infrastructure as a driver for a socio-economic development has never been stronger. However, we see a huge investment gap. $100 billion a year, according to the African Development Bank, is a challenge. And yet we also saw a capital flight leaving Africa during the crisis. But again, these challenges, we see them as opportunities. Why? Because the continent has solid fundamentals. The continent has tremendous natural and human resources. The youngest population from a demographic perspective, with growing middle class, one of the highest urbanization rates, and the African continental free trade area. You know, think of it, a market of 1.3 billion people set to double, where goods can flow freely. This is a sizable market. Now we have to build the necessary infrastructure, the enabling infrastructure to make it work seamlessly, but I see a lot of opportunities. And if you add the context of today, the fuel crisis and the global warming, we in Africa, we have vast natural gas resources and renewable energy resources. These offer huge opportunities in the midstream gas and green infrastructure space. And we believe that ASIF, Africa 50, and other investors really can help drive investment in that space to support Africa development, but also the climate transition. We believe we are at an inflection point here in Africa, and we need to change the narrative. Many of my colleagues, the speakers before me, have talked about that, because we have done good investment here, right here on the continent, with huge impact and good returns. So why we should continue to work very hard to attract global investors. We need to do that. But we must also focus a lot on attracting regional investors, African capital to fund the continent's infrastructure. We have to do a lot more work on that. Everybody understands the figure, big numbers, $2 trillion of assets under management from African institutional investors. Even a small portion of that directed to African infrastructure could help close the gap. And this is what ASIF is trying to do, really to speed up, because a number of initiatives are on the way. Folks are working in different countries. What we need now is to speed up. So we must do everything we can to help ASIF succeed. And we believe that really infrastructure will be a good driver for those investments, because infrastructure offers both long-term counter-cyclical returns and strong development impact, something all of us are increasingly caring about. We must find ways to catalyze more institutional capital flows into African infrastructure, and let me share quickly 3 ideas as to how we could do this. The first one is asset recycling. This is a mechanism that we have been advocating at Africa 50 with the support of the African Development Bank. Asset recycling can help attract private and institutional investors into African infrastructure. It enables governments really to free up the capital that they've invested in assets that the governments have funded by offering those assets to private investors as part of concessions, for example. The freed up capital could then be used by government to invest in new assets. This is how the recycling works. I think this type of mechanism can help attract different types of investors, sovereign wealth funds, industrial investors, which are different from the traditional DFIs, development financial institutions, which have been funding PPPs across many developing countries. And of course, we can apply asset recycling to green assets. In this case, we call it green asset recycling. That also can help drive Africa's road towards meeting the climate goals. Second idea is we need to figure out a way to offer investment vehicles that are tailored to the needs of institutional investors. This is why at Africa 50, we recently launched the Africa 50 Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. Our objective is to raise $500 million in multiple closings, and we have designed the fund using the best international practices. And we are further enhancing these funds by offering to the fund the option to acquire a pool of operational assets from Africa 50's project finance balance sheet to ensure that the fund has immediate access to a quality and diversified pool of African infrastructure assets that are already in operations and producing steady cash flows. I'm pleased to see the progress that we've made so far on these funds. I want to thank my friend Uche for his leadership in supporting the fund, but also we'll be talking to a number of you, sovereign wealth funds, certainly Obaid, Itmar, my friend Carlos is here from Angola, and a number of other institutions. The final idea I'd like to put on the table is project development, project preparation. First of all, I'm very happy that there is a panel that will be talking about this specifically. I think to meet the substantial financing need that we need to invest to close African infrastructure gap, we must build a pipeline of bankable projects. This requires substantial increase in project preparation and project development resources. This is what we do at Africa 50. This is part of our core mandate, to invest, to develop projects. But what we do is not enough. We need a lot more resources in that space. We are advocating that sovereign wealth funds should increase their allocation to project preparation and project development. We like to partner with sovereign wealth funds and sovereign wealth funds in that space because we believe that sovereign wealth funds can play a catalytic role in the project development space. They have the attributes that are important for project development, being owned by government, but also being professional managers of projects. So Africa 50 is looking forward to deepening the cooperation with sovereign wealth funds in the project development space. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that really crisis can breed opportunities. And this is a good time to invest in Africa infrastructure. At Africa 50, we have proven that well-prepared infrastructure projects in Africa can be impactful and also deliver good returns. We have made money on infrastructure projects in Africa, and there's nothing wrong with that. We need to tell the story. We've invested in 400 megawatts in Egypt. We have 120 megawatts in Senegal. We've just acquired 170 megawatts in Mozambique. We have a Kigali Innovation City in Rwanda. We have a Azura project in Nigeria. We have a lot of infrastructure projects that we invested in. We invested in Ghana also. Solomon Asamoah is here. We're making money, but it's still too small. So what we need to do now is to speed up the implementation and to scale up. We need to do a lot more. And together, we believe that we can actually go faster. And I like an idea that was presented yesterday, which is to say that when we start to see sovereign wealth funds of one country investing in another one, maybe through Africa 50 or not, then we will start to give the confidence to the other investors actually to join us. So together we can achieve these big goals. And so thank you very much. Just before I leave the stage, I'd like to announce that Africa 50 will be hosting a roundtable dedicated to this topic next month on July 20th in Marrakesh during the US Africa Business Forum. We'll be having a number of US institutional investors that will come through. And then we're talking about institutional investors' investment in infrastructure. We hope that as many sovereign wealth funds members of ASIF will join. We will certainly be extending an invitation to all of you. This is the time to invest in Africa infrastructure. We can make impact and make good money. In a small scale, Africa 50 has demonstrated that. Individually, you have demonstrated that. Now, collectively, let's do it faster and at scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like now to invite to the stage our first panelists and moderator for the first roundtable of today, Mr. Abdou Diop, not Abdou Diop, but Abdou Diop, sorry, and his distinguished panelist for the first roundtable entitled Project Preparation, Local Partners, Investment Ready Opportunity. Thank you. Yeah, they will bring it. It's here. You'll be sitting here and you have the mics. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I'll also, as the other, thank Itmar Capital and its CEO, Obeid, for hosting us for this very important event, and specifically through ASIF, as I say, contributing to build the Africa we want, the Africa where people go together, join their forces to build our future, and that's very important. And as Alain was saying just now, we need to speed up, right? There are a lot of needs in infrastructure. We need to be innovative, we need to be creative, we need to move up all these projects across the continent because the gap is huge and we can achieve it only if we speed up and only if we join our forces together. So to discuss about it and to show some interesting examples that are going through the continent, we have a very prestigious panel with 3 persons who are each in its sector doing many things across the continent. I'll present first Mrs. Amina Ben Khadra. Mrs. Amina Ben Khadra is a key actor of the mining and oil and gas sector in Morocco and in Africa since many years. She has been in charge of different key projects in the sector. Today she is the CEO of the Office National des Hydrocarbures et des Mines, but also she is leading a very important and impactful Africa integration project, and we will learn about it later on. I have also Mr. Solomon Asamoah, which is the CEO of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Welcome, Mr. Asamoah. And Mr. Ziad Alexander Hayek, which is the president of the World Association of PPPs. PPP is something which is very important in the continent to develop infrastructure, and we will talk about it during this panel. So I'll begin with Mrs. Benkhadra. Please, if you can, dear Amina, present us this landscape of project investment in the continent, and also talk about this tremendous project you are leading and which will be a game changer in the infrastructure landscape in the continent.
Thank you, Mr. Diop, for your introduction. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great opportunity to be today here with you and to share with you information about needs for investment in Africa, especially for infrastructures. And as Mr. Esobiso Ebo Sise has said, we will present you a bold project with a strategic vision which has to be concerned by financial institutions and especially the funds that you are representing today. So let me first make a brief presentation about the landscape in Africa. We have spoken a lot about it since yesterday. Many people have presented the opportunities that our continent has. You agree with me certainly that this continent, despite the crisis we are facing, the health one and the geopolitical one, is still the continent of the future, but it will need a lot of investment, a lot of integration, and a lot of financing. And in the new context we are facing, we look this continent, and we look also to the role of emerging and developing countries, very important for the future and for achieving the global transition to a new low-carbon world that we are looking for altogether. And Africa can play a key role in this context. So Africa, as you are all aware, is rich, as it has been said also, by its human potential, by its natural resources, minerals, energy, all kinds of energy, renewable energy, hydropower, gas, and oil, but is also facing a lot of challenges. And the first one is the low electrification of our continent. Right now we have almost 600 million people not acceding to good energy or to clean energy. And if we continue like we are today, it will take us until 2080 to bring energy and electricity to all the African people. We have also low agricultural yields, and despite the fact that our country has more than 60% of the world's arable land, and we have also the lowest integration rate in our continent. So with this in mind, we also are facing a lot of barriers. It has been said yesterday, barriers to development, mainly financial barriers, lack of skilled and prepared human resources, institutional and regulatory frameworks barriers, but also lack of information, sharing, and capitalization of experience elsewhere. And as you see in this page, the needs for infrastructures investment is huge. We need between $120 to $170 billion a year from now to 2025 and 2030. And as you see, the lack of investment for Africa is much higher than in the world, and we will have a deficit of between $70 to $100 billion. So this shows the importance of your sovereign funds to be the catalyst for investment, since we have the opportunities to build a lot of great infrastructures. And I have the opportunity today to share with you these very important projects that has been launched by His Majesty the King and His Excellency President Buhari. A project which is bringing what we are seeking for: development for our continent, development for these West African countries, more than 16 countries, increasing the access to energy easily and quickly and with good energy, because gas is considered as a good energy. And I will give you also the other objectives. So the initiatives has been taken in 2016 by during the visit of His Majesty to Nigeria, and the two sovereign funds of Morocco, ITMAR, and the fund of Nigeria have signed a first agreement, strategic partnership agreement, to study such a project. Then in 2017, it has been, we had the signature of the pipeline cooperation agreement between ONIM, the Office National of Hydrocarbon and Mining in Morocco, and the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, to conduct the feasibility study and the FEED, the front-end engineering study. And so we have done all this right now, and we make the feasibility study in 2018, then the pre-FEED was completed in 2019. The main FEED tendering has been conducted during the year 2020, and we started in June 2021, the main FEED, which is ongoing today. ECOWAS approved the synergy between this very important project and the WAGP, extension pipeline, in their meetings in Ouagadougou in December 2020. So all the countries in the regions are highly interested in this, and you see the main project objectives of such a strategic one. It's the electrification and energy self-sufficiency, the improvement of the living conditions, the development of industrial sectors, and we have on the routing of this project many countries which are very rich with many minerals, with iron ore, with bauxite, and they need more energy and competitive energy to make those industries developed. It will play a key role in the economic integration of our continent. It will also help to reduce the gas flaring in the area of production. And one of the main purposes also of the project since the beginning was to export gas to Europe. And we were presenting export gas to Europe as one way to diversify the supply of European Union. And European Union has always in their objectives diversification of supply. But 2 years ago, when we started discussions with them, they were saying, yeah, we have to be in 2050, net zero, etc. And 2 months ago, the position has changed, and you are aware why, because of the world that the world is knowing right now. They are looking and accelerating the need for diversification. They have launched the Repower EU. This Repower EU, they have the obligation to diversify, to look for new sources of gas, and they have also the objectives to introduce the Power-to-X programs and hydrogen programs, and you can see that this project will be also a way to produce and export hydrogen to Europe. So this is an important project also because it will concern more than 340 million people that will benefit from it. We have 13 countries on the Atlantic coast and 3 inside. We have also natural reserves proven connected of 5,400 billion cubic meters. And we have the gas coming from Nigeria, but we have also presented this gazoduc as an opportunity for countries who will be starting production of gas. And mainly I look here to Senegal and Mauritania, with whom we have started very important and positive discussions and negotiations. They will use this gazoduc as a way of export of gas to Europe also, and especially in parallel with the first phases they are developing right now. They are constructing LNG production with BP and Cosmos, the main companies that are developing the Big Tortue field in the offshore between Senegal and Mauritania. So important development for the continent, for different sectors. And here it comes the interest for sovereign funds present here. And mainly I want to seize this opportunity to thank the 2 first sovereign funds, ITMAR and the Nigerian Sovereign Invest Authority, who is present today with us, that have initiated this project. But in Africa, we have also many other sovereign funds. here today, and we can speak about the other funds from Nigeria, the one from Senegal, from Ghana, and from Mauritania, and we invite them to consider this as an important project for their investment, so that those sovereign funds can be the link between other multilateral financing institutions. So this project is very important for the sovereign wealth funds, and they have a a viable option to finance the NMGP, Nigeria-Morocco Gas Pipeline. The resources available to sovereign wealth fund allows them to participate in the largest deal opportunities offered to our continent, and the NMGP is one of them. And they will function essentially as development bank and mandated to help attract the other institutional financial institutions and contribute to develop the local economies. And at the end, I just want to say that our sovereign funds in Morocco and elsewhere in Africa has really a great opportunity today to play the key role they have to play to contribute to the development of our continent, to contribute to the integration of our continent, and to play this catalyst and by attracting investment, as I said, by attracting more needs of investment to our continent. So the NMGP represents really a framework for collective action and will attract also co-partnership on an equal basis or capital at fund level rather than project level. That's the end, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Amina, for this presentation. I think in the history of Africa, it's the largest infrastructure project that involves so many countries, 16 countries. I think since we have never done such huge infrastructure and a key infrastructure, because it's really integrating all the continent, and it also gives a reality to ASIF, because as we see, many sovereign funds are investing in this project, and that's also why we are here today, and it's the occasion to turn to Mr. Salomon Asamoah. I saw in the presentation that Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund is also part of it, and as Mrs. Benhadra said, sovereign wealth funds are catalysts for investment in infrastructure. Today, what is the trend do you see in this implication of sovereign fund in infrastructure, and how you see your implication in the project, and also the impact in the local population and local areas?
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. And once again, let me thank the organizers for inviting us. One of the things that the former Prime Minister Benin yesterday said was that there are different types of sovereign wealth funds with different structures. The Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund is one that focuses on infrastructure. We were established by the government, and they gave us our seed capital of initially $250 million, and it's now gone up to about $345 million, which represents a significant investment by the country. Compared to other sovereign wealth funds, it's not the largest, but it's significant for the country. And they gave us a very clear mandate, which was to invest and develop infrastructure assets within Ghana. And they recognized that $325 million is a lot of money, but compared to the needs in Ghana, it's not a lot. So they tasked us with leveraging that capital and bringing in other sources of funding alongside us. And we've managed to do that. We've been quite busy over the last 4.5 years. We now have a portfolio of 13 infrastructure investments. And for every $1 that we've invested, we've managed to attract $10 of outside money into our particular projects. And how have we managed to do that in a relatively short space of time? I think just about every single project that we've done has involved some form of project development, as Alan was saying previously in the previous presentation. The infrastructure projects in Africa don't come ready cooked like in other places, but we have to prepare, we have to do the work initially, and that's risk capital. And we decided as an institution, we have that risk tolerance. and our capacity to absorb that. So project development, funding early stage, the preparation and development of projects is a key part of what we do. And it's going to be necessary for any major infrastructure investments across the continent. And so we're looking, we like the fact that DFIs, Africa 50, African Development Bank, other institutions have allocated funding for this. We need more, but the returns that you can get, even on project development, make it an acceptable investment class in itself. So one of the messages that I wanted to put across here is that we've been successful in closing a number of projects, but project development is part and parcel of being successful in infrastructure investments in Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samora, in this introduction in project development and how the Ghana Infrastructure Fund is leveraging on all the possibilities to push the infrastructure in the country and in the region. And I'll turn to now Mr. Hayek to see, we are talking a lot in this project about PPPs. And sometimes it seems that PPP can be the solution, but still many PPPs are in projects not coming out of the ground. How today PPP can be a game changer in the continent?
Thank you very much. And I, of course, want to start by thanking Abed Omran for the invitation and Ismar Capital for this initiative. A couple of words about WAP, the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals. We are a global association with 40 governments as members and 300 corporate and individual investors and members. We focus on creating better PPPs around the world. A word about me, because it's important for you to know who is talking to you. I'm not trying to brag, just to tell you, give you some comfort in the ideas that I'm going to present. I've been an investment banker for 24 years with Citibank, Salomon Brothers, and Bear Stearns in New York and London. I've worked for the US government and for the Lebanese government for 16 years. I was a candidate or a nominee for the presidency of the World Bank in 2019. And I have lived and worked everywhere in the world. Hopefully this will, like I said, shed some light on what I'm going to say. We have heard yesterday from Minister saying, invest in technology. Well, we all know that you guys here are not investors in startups. It's exciting. You want to be. We all like to find the next unicorn, but that's not your mandate. You all like to invest in large technology items, as Dr. Kapape mentioned, which is great, but that's not in Africa. You would like to help your countries and invest in SMEs, but that's not your mandate either. You don't have the capability of dealing with such small ticket items. Then what do? Where is your investment going to go? If you're going to invest in Africa, if you are really going to make a difference in this continent. Well, we've heard a lot about infrastructure. And indeed, infrastructure is the way. It is the way to create jobs in large numbers. How many small boutiques are you going to open, and what jobs you're going to create? It's going to be, mom and pop shops employing each other. But infrastructure is different. Infrastructure employs engineers and managers and laborers, all different levels of society. It creates jobs for the educated or for the uneducated. And infrastructure projects come in large items, which means they're good for you to invest in. Well, that's great. What kind of infrastructure projects are you going to invest in? You're not going to invest in purely public infrastructure projects. You're going to invest in projects where there is more a private sector approach. You're going to invest in projects where there is a credible partner that would know about this, that has experience, that you can trust to go alongside them, i.e. typically a large multinational or some other company, maybe African even, that has that expertise. So how do these companies end up doing infrastructure projects? It's only through PPP. It's the only way. Don't think about anything else. It's only PPP. We talk about power plants, we talk about desalination plants, we talk about solar energy, we talk about transportation, we talk about gas pipelines, we talk about, at the end of the day, all of these are one form of public-private partnership or another. And by the way, we at WAP don't look at some in the French-speaking world differentiate between concessions and PPP, thinking that PPP is like the British model. We don't. Concessions and PFI, Public Finance Initiative, are all PPPs, whether it is the user that pays or whether it is the government that pays. They're based on the same basic principles. And PPPs, for somebody to do a PPP transaction, for a private company to enter into PPP transaction, they would have done the work. It has to be a bankable transaction because no company is going to finance a full infrastructure project with equity. So if they're going to put in their equity, they're going to borrow, and if they're going to borrow, they would have done financial modeling and what we call value for money. And that's what you want. They would have done a lot of the work for you. A lot of the due diligence, would have been done. Of course, you would need to complement it for your own boards, etc. So, one more thing. These large projects in Africa tend to attract the likes of the World Bank, IFC, African Development Bank, other MDBs. And it is a comforting factor for you to invest alongside these institutions. So not only you have a reliable private partner that has done the work and the due diligence and all of this, you also have likely a multilateral development institution that gives you even more comfort. So with that, I really would like to invite you to learn more about PPP. It is a whole field. The same way that I'm discovering here a field of sovereign wealth funds that I was not as familiar with. You probably think that maybe you know PPP, because after all, it's just a public and a private investing together or some project like this. But PPP is very complicated. So I invite you all to learn more about it. I invite you all to, and I invite ASIF and all your organization, the ISWFI, I think, to become more integrated with ours, with WAP, in order for us to do things together, because we can orient you to projects. We just had our conference last week, our annual conference, and 25 governments made presentations, including 5 African governments, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Kenya, and Rwanda. And in each case, they made a list of all the projects that they have, that they are working on in their pipeline. Knowledge about this pipeline and what's coming down the drain is going to be important for you to start planning your activities for this year or next year as to what projects you may be on the horizon. I can talk a lot more, but I will stop here. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for promoting PPPs, as you say, and it's not surprising, coming from the president of World Association of PPPs, that PPP is the only way today to develop infrastructure projects with 2 pillars,
Sorry, not the only way to develop infrastructure projects, the only way for sovereign wealth funds to invest
to invest in infrastructure projects. Okay. Private sector approach and credible partners are also two very important pillars. And this allow me to turn to Solomon, as Mr. Ziad is saying, PPP is the only way for sovereign fund to invest in infrastructure. How, at your level, do you consider PPPs? And also, we often talk in Africa about preparation of PPPs, how you tackle that issue of preparing good PPPs.
Thank you very much. And I'd first like to respond to what my fellow panelists just said. You almost described perfectly our approach, in that we in Ghana are the ones doing that work that you've identified. So when we come up with a project that we are doing in infrastructure, trust me, we've asked all the questions that all of you would ask, and we've put those into the financial model and the structuring. That's why, as I said, we've managed to raise 10 times as much money as we've put in. And I think this is a critical role for each of us to play in our respective countries. If I do have appetite and the ability to invest in Gabon or Nigeria or Kenya, my first port of call would be the sovereign wealth fund of those particular countries if their mandate is to do infrastructure projects, because we would see the world the same. So I would just like to echo what he said. The types of projects that we've done in a relatively short space of time are very diversified. We've done 8 different sectors: a new airport, the second major expansion, the second major port in Ghana, power projects, mining projects, oil and gas projects, hospitality projects, and every single one of them except one has involved the private sector and private sector financing. And so it's really how we can unlock the funding necessary to do the investments. But I have a criticism of PPPs as well, and I want to put this on the table because I think we should all be frank and honest amongst ourselves. The challenge in Africa, if you go to any country, speak to any minister or any president, and say you want to do PPPs, their first reaction would likely to be negative. And the reason why their initial reaction is negative, the track record of PPPs in Africa has not been great. Or let me talk about sub-Saharan Africa, has not been great. And the major problem has been the time it takes to select the winning party. It interferes with the political cycle. So what happens, right, is that you start a process under World Bank guidelines maybe, 18, 24 months later, you haven't yet selected or you're close to selecting your winning bidder, then you go into negotiations, etc. And then the president and the minister and the government of that country starts getting nervous. We have to face the electorate in a year and a half. I've got nothing to show. So what do? They cancel. Somebody flies in the night, sees the minister or the president quietly, says, cancel that thing, we can do it for you. Forget it. So they cancel it. The World Bank is upset. Everybody's upset. And then the people that flew in and said, we can do it, we have the money, it turns out they don't have the money. They don't have the expertise. So they have to go out and try and raise the money. And the first question they're going to get asked, how did you get this award? And then the funders will not fund them. And so it cancels, and then the next election happens, and then we start again. So my view is, and I want the smartest brains in the world to address this. I've raised this many times with the World Bank and various organizations. We have to find a way to reduce the time it takes to award the concession without cutting corners, because it is a very important selection process to get the right party. But my estimate is that anything that takes longer than 12 to 18 months, you're likely to run into a political hurdle. So we have to figure out that way. If we can do that, if we can select the right party within a 12, 15-month period, then PPPs have a chance, because the government then sees that they will have something to show the electorate in 2 years. And that's something I think we should all focus on.
Thank you very much. for this point. Hello. Thank you for this point you are raising, which is the parallelism between the political time and the development of project timing. And before coming back to you, Mr. Alexander, to perhaps answer on this criticism, I'll turn just a moment to Mrs. Benhadra. We are talking about a lot also in this about financing, because the delay is also related to the financing of studies and so on. How did you manage in this very important project to finance the FEED and to reduce the timing before I give the floor to Zia?
So initially, as we signed the PCA between ONIM and NNPC, there was a dedicated governance that had been put on with a strategic committee governing the conduct of this study, and we evaluated the cost of the feasibility study, and it was funded 100% between the two parties. So it was public funds from Morocco and Nigeria, from ONIM and NNPC. When the pre-FEED also, but when we came to the FEED study, which price is much higher because there are very important detailed studies. We are working right now on a corridor of 1 kilometer on all the 6,000 kilometers. We have to launch the ASIA study and the survey study. So we go to financing, and we got loans from the Islamic Bank Development and from the OPEC Fund, which were very happy to contribute to this project. And so we are going to conduct the feasibility study easily. But when we'll come to the financing of the project, the profitability has been evaluated. The project is economically profitable by the FS study and the pre-FEED study, and we are sure that the FEED will be also the same. We will have a period of discussion with the multilateral banks, with major companies, because we will have this project for all the parties interested. It will be participation of all the stakeholders, from sovereign funds, from multilateral financial institutions, from bankers, from major companies, those who are going to feed with gas from Nigeria, and we have major companies. So we are looking to all those kinds of institutions, and we will do our homework to the FID, which will be done certainly by the end of 2023.
Okay, thank you very much. So the implication at the beginning of these two main organizers to finance the first pre-study have been an accelerator, and then you find the financing to move forward. So just to turn to Ziad again, so Mr. Asama was criticizing the delay of the PPPs, and specifically this issue between time of politics and time of projects. So how can you give some key solutions for that?
Thanks. I don't see it as a criticism. I see it as a statement of fact. Solomon is right. This is how it is. PPPs take a long time. And now, with the requirements of ESG, they take even a longer time, because you need to do the environmental studies and you need to do the social impact studies and all of that. So, and it's not about cutting corners, because we don't want to cut corners and then end up with failed projects. Most of the projects of PPP done, especially in emerging markets, that have failed because they were rushed by politicians. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, I want my project. The guy in the PPP unit is like, oh my God, my boss wants the project. I'll go, I'll do something, whatever, and then you end up with a failed project. This is not the right way to do it. The problem is not with the PPP, the problem is with the politicians. So, you know, what we need to do and what we do at WAP is we try to spend a lot of time with members of parliament and with ministers and prime ministers. We haven't talked to any president yet. To say, look, PPP has to take time. You need to design the project. You need to study bankability. You need to talk to banks. You need to talk to companies. You need to do the studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're in a hurry for a particular project, pay for it. If you're in a hurry, borrow money and pay for it, and don't do it on a PPP basis. Prioritize your projects. You have 6 projects you want to do. There are 2 that you need to deliver before the end of your mandate. Put these 2 and fund them. And put the other 4 on a PPP basis that may end up being in, happening in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. So we have to learn, and we have to educate our politicians in Africa to learn the proper planning. Planning means you don't get everything today. Planning means you structure things in the future. And you guys have an important role to play because you are credible. Unlike the PPP unit in the country, which are our members, they are seen as self-serving, or they're seen as lazy. Oh, you tell me you cannot do it, it's because you're lazy. But you as an investor are more credible because you can tell the minister, Mr. Minister, this needs time. I want to make 2 related comments. One is that the effort to do a PPP project right requires funding. Project preparation, as Solomon was talking about, and in case of Ghana, they are funding it as development bank. But in many countries, there's nobody to fund that. Now, the World Bank has started setting up some small facilities here and there. But I encourage you to think about this. You, as sovereign wealth funds, some of these projects might be smaller than your smallest ticket item if you're like a GCC fund, talking about hundreds of millions and above. Or it might, for whatever reason, you don't see this as your mandate. But do it as a corporate social responsibility, as a CSR thing. Do it as something contribution from you to the betterment of society. Put a grant money, put a small amount. It's nothing compared to your size. To develop projects. And that fund that develops projects, that studies projects can be renewed from revenues from a PPP later on. That project preparation fund, which can be less than $10 million, and especially if you cooperate with other entities, with the World Bank, et cetera, put up $1 million here or there, and say, this is my contribution to creating good projects in that country. And the other thing is about, well, actually, I forget the other thing, so I'll
Okay, thank you.
I had it, but
Yes,
at my age, I forget.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
I'll come to you just now. And yes, you are tackling important points. Educate our politicians for proper planning. That's a great point because I think it's a key factor. And addressing also project preparation, I think it's key, and it's will give me the transition to give you back the mic and to ask in this row of questions, how do you address these project preparations Ziad is talking about, which is quite key for enhancing projects' bankability, and which role do you play in the PPPs?
Thank you. I always believe that these things become very interesting when you have live examples. And what you have just described is what I'm living right now in Ghana. So I'm going to describe it to you, and you'll see the issues that was just... Ghana's been trying to do toll road projects for at least 15 years, and they've never succeeded to date. And a lot of it is to do with the political cycle that I mentioned. So what happened at the beginning of this, my current president's term in 2016, there was a process to award a concession for a major toll road, Accra to Tema, in Ghana, started under the previous administration. They didn't finish, election came, but this government decided to continue with the process. Many other governments cancel, but they because it's the opposition that came into power. But they decided to continue with the process. And they continue with the process, and 2 years into the term, they finally awarded the concession to a group, a good group, a strong group of technical and financial parties. And then they went into negotiations with them, and they couldn't reach an agreement. Essentially, the consortium felt that they needed such a large level of grants from the government. The government was saying, if we're giving you that much grant money to do the project versus what you're raising, then there's something not right. So they cancelled. And then I got a call from the Minister of Finance because we have a new PPP law in the country, in Ghana. And the PPP law says that if there's a process that fails, then you can give it to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, to run it and see if they can come with a solution. So my minister called me and says, would you take a look at this and see whether you think you can get it done? So I took a look, we did the analysis, and we said we believe we can get it done. So we, as GIF, now become the concessionaire. And we become the group that's driving this project. And we become the group that's doing the final development. Now, the credibility that we have with our own government gives us an advantage, that the suspicion is always that the private sector party is trying to screw the government and the country. With us driving this, that is mitigated because we report to the Ministry of Finance. Secondly, because we've built up a track record over the last 4 years of doing infrastructure projects with the private sector, we have a degree of credibility with private sector and financiers in particular. So there's an element of trust. I mean, we're still working on it, but it's enough for us to. So when we call them and say, listen, we've done our initial due diligence, we think this is interesting enough for us to bring you on board, we get a positive response. So we started raising the funding. We got a lending group together of 10 financing institutions. We were the drivers as the concession. Things were going well. And then, as often happens with governments, left hand and the right hand not working together, there was an announcement that they are abolishing tolls in the country, which wasn't the nicest thing for us to hear, trying to in the middle of this project. So, however, it was a miscommunication. We've managed to address that issue. But what we realized was that that overhang would affect lenders, and they probably wouldn't come at this time. So we made a different proposal to the government. We said to them, why don't we split into 3 parts and do the first part with public money? If it's a priority, you pay for it as government. And then what we will do, after completing that first section, we will either give you the choice, you can then concession and get your money back. You could refinance with local pension funds and local institutions, local currency, because the tolls are going to be collected in local currency. Or you could remain it as GIF owned. We would collect the tolls and the funding and repay you the money that you put in over a period of time. Because the issue with PPPs, particularly in Africa, is that because the governments don't have a long track record, lenders are very suspicious or very uncomfortable that the government will fulfill its obligations. So they want layer upon layer of legal agreements and project finance and assurances and guarantees, and then the government's guarantee is not enough, so they need the World Bank, and then they need et cetera. And so what happens, these becomes very complicated, and it's the end user that is paying for all of this, and so it becomes very expensive to the end user. If we can find a way to fund quickly, maybe through public funds, and build the infrastructure quickly, if we can be assured that we can do it with the discipline that the private sector would do it, then this is a new model of doing infrastructure projects. And the sovereign wealth funds, I believe, are the vehicles with their credibility on both sides that can drive something like this.
Thank you, Salomon. I understood that credibility and also innovation is quite key on driving those projects to find ways to innovate and to finance. And I'll turn to Mrs. Benkhadra. The project you have presented is really cross-border and a little bit different than usual project we see. How you manage to bring in international capital provider when it comes to such large-scale cross-border projects? Are there specific requirements, and what are the key success to mobilize them?
Yes, of course, it's a long process. We have first to have the conclusions of our feasibility study and FEED, which have shown us that the project is economically viable and profitable. So we went to the second phase, the pre-FEED, and now the FEED. With this FEED, which is the detailed study, we are preparing ourselves to go to the FID, as I said before, and for this, we have also to be ready for a certain number of questions, and the main investor will ask, of course, about profitability first, but also about impact, consequences of and impacts of environmental and social studies, which we are dealing with right now, because it's very, very important for any new projects and financing of new projects. And at the same time, as we have 13 countries, we have started negotiation with the CEDEAO and ECOWAS, excuse me, I always say the French sigle, with ECOWAS, with Mauritania and Senegal. And we are working also on the preparation of an intergovernmental agreement and for identifying the rules that will be managing these projects, rules on the specific aspect of fiscal terms, of legal terms, and of course all the commercial terms. This is hard work, and we are dealing with it, and we hope that all the conclusions will be there, all the parameters that will be necessary for the financial institutions to be looked at, because they will secure the projects, will be prepared on due time, as I say, by 2023.
Okay, then clarity on the project, documentation, and all the preparation, but also, as you said in the beginning, profitability is key, because it's basically a profitable project. That's very important. So just to come on on the last word of each of you, how an organization like this meeting and this Association of Sovereign Fund can be a really key driver in the investment and infrastructure landscape?
I wasn't ready for my final words yet. I thought I still have some turn, but it's okay.
You have still some time, but
Okay.
every turn takes 15 minutes, so that's why I say final words.
I'm just kidding you. I'm just kidding you. Look, I think, so I was saying sovereign wealth funds can play an important role in project preparation. Here's one thing that happens all the time. Governments go through this whole thing like bureaucracies. You know, we are going to do a tender process to select an advisor. And then they select the advisor. And cost is one of the elements. And then they end up selecting a cheap advisor. Or even if they don't select a cheap advisor, it is impacted by the price of the advisor. And then they get some firm that puts some junior guys that have never done anything, you know, to do some nice presentations and come up with something that ends up working or not working. You know, I started doing PPPs in the 1980s in Latin America. And we did PPPs that were greenfield, that were groundbreaking. My team and I invented the securitization of future receivables. And we invented the securitization of future receivables to finance PPP projects in the capital markets. But we were working for Wall Street firms. And these are the kind of advisors that you need. You need to have the Goldman Sachses of the world and the JP Morgans of the world advising you on these projects, not, you know, some consultant that, you know, has never really financed anything from their pocket. So, and for that, money is needed, and you can help. That's why I'm saying the project preparation funds are very important. Because if you're funding part of that project preparation fund, you have a say on which advisor to choose. And you're going to choose an advisor that you, as an investor, as a global level investor, I mean, you guys are operating at this level, you know, can have a say in choosing the advisors. You're not nickel and diming somebody. That's one thing. The other thing that you can do to contribute is some of your funding, maybe not in all cases, but in some cases, some of your funding can be in local currency. And if some of your funding is in local currency when you finance a project, you can help absorb, not all, but at least cushion a little bit, mitigate to a certain extent the exchange risk, you know, of a toll road, of a tariff or whatever. So that is very, very important, and that's key in Africa. And it takes creativity as to how to structure the project and how to structure the payment mechanisms and all of that in order for you to be able to mitigate that risk. The other thing is longer tenors. I mean, you guys are in large part in the longer tenor business. So being able to provide funding for projects long tenor is crucial, because the banking institutions in your countries, especially in Africa, are providing funding on a very short-term basis. Now, you cannot blame them because their liabilities are short-term. Of course, their assets are going to be short-term. So you can play that important role. Even more important than that. Even more important than that. You can take those investments that you make in those PPP projects and create capital markets with them. Look at the Abu Dhabi Water and Energy Authority. Adwea started doing PPP projects for power generation and desalination on a PPP basis. Not because Adwea didn't have the money to pay for the entire project. Of course, they could have paid for it from their pocket. But they brought in the private sector to own part of the project. The government said, I will take part of this project. In this case, Sovereign Wealth Fund could take part of this project. And then they put them all in an entity that they floated. And that creates the local capital markets. Local capital markets are extremely important for development. That was, when I was running for the presidency of the World Bank, that was my main thing. I was saying, look, it's like oil. You can go to Saudi Arabia or Venezuela and dig a hole and you get oil. You can go to London or New York, knock on a door and you get money. But there is oil in Pennsylvania if you crack it in the shale. There is shale oil. There is money in emerging markets if you crack it. You just need to crack the money in the emerging markets and pool it. And maybe, like there's so much shale oil that the US has become an exporter, emerging markets can even become that rich. So, but who is going to start the engine? Who is going to, get that capital market going in one country or another? You can play an important role. I hope you feel how important you are. I hope that you realize that perhaps the future of this part of the world is in large part, I don't want to say on your shoulders, but you can play an important role in it. Thanks.
Thank you so much for this advice, as Sovereign Wealth Fund are critical for the development of the infrastructure, and they can play a good role in this. I note something which is very important, which is the project preparation fund, because it's something which is key today. Also the fact that sovereign funds are longer term, and that's also very important in projects. Mr. Asamoah.
Thank you. I think I could listen to him for hours, because It
He's
just
passionate.
but it resonates with me what he says. It resonates with my experiences, and I particularly want to highlight the point that he mentioned about funding of advisors. Now, DFIs have come a long way in supporting project development. Initially, I'm old enough to remember, maybe 15, 20 years ago, it was feasibility studies that the DFIs financed. Then it was, they had a number of project preparation facilities. The challenge was they would hire consultants to do these pre-feasibility or studies, and then the studies would sit on a shelf and nobody would pick them up because they weren't. You had a consultant who had never closed a deal before, trying to make a bankable deal for a deal that was not bankable. And so the end result was not something that any private sector sponsor wanted to pick up. And I always said, exactly what was said here, the people that you need to be doing the project development are the best in the market, are the experienced lawyers, the experienced investment bankers. But these people are not cheap. They're very expensive. And the DFIs have a natural allergic reaction to any of their money going to these high-priced lawyers, high-priced investment bankers. They just can't get over that hurdle. We sovereign wealth funds, maybe we don't have that issue if it's part of a priority project for the country. So we could contribute to financing the right advisors to provide the right level of skills, but most important, the right level of comfort to potential lenders that this is going to be something that after these studies are done, this is bankable. And that's, I think, is a very critical, probably the critical component, I think, of project development, of increasing the number of bankable infrastructure projects that we can all finance. And then again, just finally, just to emphasize the point once again, we can work with each other in our various countries as the sovereign wealth funds to attract financing in our particular countries because we've been working with a group who sees the world the same way that we see the world. And that's what I hope that this platform will help push. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important call to action of this platform, which will be key to help all the countries move forward in the development of infrastructure. Mrs. Benkhadra.
I just want to make comments on what have been said by those two eminent participants, because we are very sensitive to your conclusion about choosing the best active consultant that can do the work, that have made deals before. We have faced this in our study, and we decided to take the best engineering companies right now working for us that have experience in transnational projects. And at the same time, we are coming to a new phase to have our transactional advisors for all the elements concerning the governance, the fiscal terms, the commercial agreements. And we are looking to choose one of the best, and we see that the prices are very high. So I hope that sovereign funds will be contributing to the financing of this last part of the study so that we can be ready to bring it to the FID and bring a very important and strategic project like ours, which has been launched by a great vision of His Majesty and President Buhari for the benefit of our continent.
I think that as you have in the whole parcours many sovereign funds, your call will be heard by the sovereign fund, and surely they will come to action. So as we saw in this panel, PPPs are very important today to move forward to develop infrastructure, but we need really to prepare all the projects to make them bankable, and the preparation, the implication of the sovereign fund can be very important. We need also to have, as you said, consultants that have already invest their own money. I noted that. I don't know if there are many of them, but at least consulting that have already done project, that have already closed project. And the most important is such platform can be very helpful to move forward and to accelerate project, because as it has been said in this panel and before, we need to speed up, because we cannot continue to afford projects that are during 10 years in preparation, because we have not all that time today. And so I hope that this platform will help to move forward and to bring out all these projects, and specifically the one we have seen, because it's an integration project and it's also a project that is in the framework of the Africa we want, bringing together countries, experience, financing, and creating wealth for the whole continent. So thank you for attending, and a round of applause to our panelists, which are really great in this sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will have just a coffee break for 30 minutes and then be back for the closing ceremony. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you and welcome again. We will now begin the closing ceremony of our Africa Sovereign Investors Forum, and I will call to the stage for the closing remarks Mr. Mohamed Mithqal, Ambassador, CEO of the Moroccan Agency for International Cooperation. Thank you.
Messieurs les PDG, des fonds souverains et stratégiques, Mesdames et Messieurs, honorables invités et participants. C'est avec un réel plaisir que je me réjouis d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui à Rabat pour prendre part à la cérémonie de clôture du Africa Sovereign Investors Forum. Aussi, je souhaite féliciter tous ceux qui ont contribué à faire émerger toutes les initiatives conclues durant ce forum. Je voudrais aussi remercier au passage tous ceux qui ont œuvré sans relâche depuis plusieurs mois à concrétiser ce forum, dont M. Obaid Amran et ses équipes. Et en particulier, je souhaite saluer le soutien apporté à la déclaration de Rabat par certains fonds souverains des pays frères du Golfe qui illustrent l'expression concrète des relations historiques liant Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI, que Dieu l'assiste, et ses frères à la tête des pays du Golfe. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, honorables invités, les relations entre le Royaume du Maroc et les pays d'Afrique subsaharienne sont séculaires et multidimensionnelles. Ces relations sont marquées de solidarité, de respect mutuel et de promotion des idéaux communs. Pour mémoire, c'est en 1961 que les premiers piliers pour la libération et l'unité de notre continent ont été posés lors de la conférence de Casablanca. Ce rêve panafricaniste continue d'animer encore et pour toujours l'action du Royaume du Maroc dans notre continent. Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI, que Dieu l'assiste, n'a eu de cesse, depuis son intronisation, de plaider et d'agir pour une Afrique stable, moderne, ouverte, prospère, confiante en elle-même, assumant et prenant en charge son avenir. Ainsi, le Royaume du Maroc continuera d'œuvrer aux côtés des pays frères de notre continent pour le développement humain et durable d'une Afrique émergente et émancipée, comme l'a souligné Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI, que Dieu l'assiste, dans son discours prononcé lors du 28e sommet de l'Union africaine à Addis Abeba, début de citation. Nous invitons avec enthousiasme les nations africaines à s'associer au dynamisme de notre pays, à donner un élan nouveau à notre continent tout entier. Fin de citation. Grâce à la vision initiée par Sa Majesté le roi, prenons une coopération sud-sud, solidaire et agissante. Une réelle dynamique nationale s'est mise en place depuis plus de 20 ans au Maroc, associant à la fois le secteur public, le secteur privé, la société civile et l'ensemble des forces vives du pays pour contribuer à l'émergence d'une Afrique nouvelle et forte. Cette vision s'inspire des mêmes valeurs de solidarité, de partenariat, de responsabilité et d'ambition visant à promouvoir le partage d'expériences et d'expertise, le co-développement humain et durable, le co-investissement et à multiplier les partenariats gagnant-gagnant au service des populations africaines. Une vision qui a fait une nouvelle fois ses preuves dans ce monde post-pandémie Covid-19. Ainsi, le Royaume du Maroc, un partenaire crédible et solidaire, partage depuis plusieurs années son expérience et son expertise avec les pays frères du continent. C'est dans cet esprit que le Royaume du Maroc, en partenariat avec plusieurs pays africains, a mis en place des projets régionaux d'envergure stratégique, comme le gazoduc Maroc-Nigeria, les unités de production de fertilisants pour contribuer à la sécurité alimentaire du continent, ou les unités de production de vaccins à vocation continentale récemment lancées par Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI. Ces projets incarnent, par leur portée ambitieuse et leur impact socio-économique profond sur le terrain, un modèle novateur et pionnier de coopération sud-sud pour une croissance durable et inclusive. Ces projets régionaux illustrent la volonté du Royaume du Maroc de renforcer notre intégration régionale africaine, facteur déterminant pour l'émergence du continent. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, honorables invités, notre continent a besoin d'accélérer son émergence. Et pour cela, l'investissement, le co-investissement et le co-développement dans les projets et les secteurs prioritaires dans les pays africains deviennent un impératif. À cet égard, le rôle des fonds souverains est stratégique. Dans cette dynamique, avec leur effet de levier, devient primordial. Il doit être complémentaire aux autres sources de capitaux classiques qui contribuent déjà au financement du développement africain. Aussi, les fonds souverains et stratégiques peuvent être une locomotive aux secteurs privés locaux, en les tirant et en les associant dans la mise en œuvre des projets locaux ou régionaux et dans lesquels les ressources financières seront investies. En tout cas, l'ensemble des discussions tenues ici durant ces 2 jours ont clairement montré que les fonds souverains et stratégiques peuvent être un réel catalyseur pour cette émergence durable du continent africain. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, honorables invités, je souhaite que l'on se félicite des initiatives lancées à l'issue du Africa Sovereign Investors Forum. Je suis convaincu que les nouvelles plateformes vont contribuer à renforcer les partenariats Sud-Sud, à développer le co-investissement dans nos pays africains ainsi que dans les projets régionaux transformateurs. Enfin, ils viseront à accélérer l'intégration économique régionale. À cet effet, je voudrais saisir cette occasion pour appeler les acteurs économiques et financiers du Maroc et ceux des pays frères africains, ainsi que les acteurs économiques et financiers internationaux, à poursuivre leur engagement au service de cette émergence africaine en mettant en place des solutions qui répondent aux défis de notre continent sur la base de nos atouts, tout en innovant en fonction de nos spécificités, de nos priorités et de nos réalités locales. Pour cela, nous devons joindre nos efforts collectivement et mettre en place des modèles de croissance inclusifs et durables pour le continent, dans une logique de cohérence, de complémentarité, de responsabilité et de solidarité. La mobilisation doit être globale et élargie, en associant à la fois aux côtés des gouvernements, le monde des affaires et les acteurs financiers, comme aujourd'hui, durant ces 2 jours de forum, mais aussi la société civile, les villes, les régions, les jeunes, les femmes, pour que ce développement soit durable et humain. Le potentiel de coopération entre les pays africains est vraiment massif et les possibilités existent sans limite. Les fonds souverains et stratégiques africains, ainsi que leurs partenaires internationaux, doivent avoir un rôle pionnier et catalyseur dans cette révolution africaine. À cet effet, nous vous encourageons à participer au prochain USA-Africa Business Summit, prévu à Marrakech du 19 au 22 juillet 2022, co-organisé par le Corporate Council on Africa et le Royaume du Maroc, dans lequel plusieurs projets stratégiques, à la fois locaux et régionaux, seront présentés aux investisseurs. Il est temps qu'on y croive et qu'on œuvre à atteindre cette émergence africaine. Ainsi, pour conclure, je souhaiterais citer un extrait du discours de Sa Majesté le Roi Mohamed VI à Abidjan en février 2014. Début de citation. « Une Afrique dynamique et développée n'est pas un simple rêve pour demain. Cela peut être une réalité aujourd'hui, mais à la condition d'agir. » Fin de citation. Je vous remercie pour votre écoute. J'espère que vous avez passé 2 jours de débat enrichis. Merci.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Last but not least, I'll call our chairman, the CEO of Ithmar Capital, and also our host, Mr. Abaid Amran.
I will apologize first because I cannot repress myself to make a comment about what I heard concerning the PPPs. I want to echo some what have been said, just to precise that when we heard that PPP can take more time, it takes more time in preparation. For one thing, to save time for the delivery. I think that this is the good precision I want to make, and I apologize for doing it in a closing session. So, it is for me with a great satisfaction, but also with a pinch in my heart, that I'm thanking all the participants for their contribution and presence. A special thanks to all my colleagues from the ASIF members, and especially for the teams that works on all what have been transformed in a success today. I am convinced that we are at the beginning of a long and fruitful relation, a relation that will allow us to achieve our respective objectives by mutualizing our efforts and consolidating our ambitions. Your contributions and presence demonstrated that Africa is ready, that we Africans are ready also, and that investors are available and ready. It is now our duty to work on the recipe that will gather the condition of success to transform our vision in realities. ASIF, the African Sovereign Investment Forum, is a platform for that. Today, it is not an achievement. Today is an engagement. Today, our responsibility toward future generation is even bigger in front of the challenges that we need to overcome and in light of the available potentialities. Africa for Africans, and by Africans, is possible, to quote His Majesty, and we are committed to participate to its construction. Lastly, I would like to thank again all the honorable guests that were kind enough to make their way to this event. The event will certainly not have been such a success without the presence and the strong interest that you have demonstrated ahead and during the conference. I wish all our guests that traveled all the way to here a pleasant end of the journey in Morocco and a safe return back home. I'm certain we will meet again very soon, and thank you. For a meal and to continue our discussion with the same enthusiasm and pleasure that have marked these 2 days of work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, the African Sovereign Investors Forum is now closed. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be also with you. And just a reminder that there is a cultural visit that is scheduled this afternoon, departing 2 p.m. The shuttles are departing from here. And for those who didn't register yet, you have a registration desk. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.